Hi, and welcome to How I Settled in West Sweden. In this series, you will hear the real stories of people who have embraced living in a new country and have settled in West Sweden. Today, you'll hear the story of Kris Granger, a marketing strategist who made the move to Gothenburg all the way from Trinidad and Tobago for love. In this episode, he talks about experiencing cultural differences, transitioning his career in Sweden, and the mindset that helped him stay resilient.
I needed to be open to the idea that I could have a great career, a great social life, that I could be respected and admired. I had actually failed forward, and 8 months later, 9 months later, I had an actual contract. Life now, with my metaphoric flower looking up, is hopeful, optimistic, and fragile. I know that an unwatered flower will wither. So I have started to discover ways to keep myself watered. My name is Kris Granger. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. I've lived in Sweden for 5.5 years. What made me come to Sweden? I was in a relationship with a Swedish girl almost 13 years ago. We met in Trinidad and Tobago. She had a musical career. I think it was pretty clear to me that her musical career was better situated here. But she came back to Sweden, and I stayed in Trinidad for quite a few years, and we commuted back and forth for a few years. And one day we just decided that let's live in Sweden for a bit. Generally speaking, I'm quite a flexible and open-minded person. Sweden was not really on my radar before meeting her. But when it did land on my radar, it landed pretty big because I understood so much that I didn't know about Sweden. The innovation, the progress of the music industry, the tech industry, the academic work happening in Sweden. And I felt that I could thrive here, at least for a little while. And so the math came together and we came. Setting up my career in Sweden and establishing myself here, I remember thinking, everything is hard in Sweden. And from setting up a bank account to reading street signs as an English speaker, it felt like I was going against the grain every single day. And I'm not sure that everyone has the exact same experience, but when I applied for a bank account, for example, I remember 2 or 3 banks saying that they don't open bank accounts for people who don't already have bank accounts. And that was the first surprise, like, what? How do you get a bank account if you don't have a bank account? And then the bank that did agree to open a new bank account for someone without a track record here, they then decided that they don't do business with Trinidad and Tobago. I'm talking 3 months, 4 months into living here, I'm trying to just open a bank account, and everything requires bank ID. So there was almost nothing, there was nowhere I can move. So the beginning of my time here, the first 6 months, was impossible. Not just Sweden, but the combination of the track record, I guess, that Trinidadian institutions had. And Trinidad is not a country that had war or those types of experiences, but we do have a high corruption index. And I think that really plays against us when we travel, which is really unfortunate because we have such a high academic population, a high literacy population, and quite an oil-rich country. So we're quite a sophisticated island, but we have a difficult reputation in financial institutions. So that worked really hard against me. I got a bank account eventually. And then we haven't even talked about getting a job. Getting a job, it could feel impossible for someone who doesn't have a very resilient mindset or a very optimistic approach to life. And I think that really saved me, that my optimism and my sense that I could adapt. I enjoyed an acting class that I went to. And I went to that acting class because I knew innately that people were the key to everything. We as a human race, we can only thrive in the context of other people. So I set out, before anything else, to make friends. And the acting class did that for me, and it was the single best decision that I made, and that sort of opened me up to volunteer opportunities and short-term work opportunities, freelance opportunities, just from being open and authentic in that space. So there was hope, but setting up a bank account, learning the language felt truly impossible. I never saw such long words. Why are 3 words put together to make 1 word? The language was really tricky. And then the culture difference between, I guess, warmer climates, Trinidad and Tobago, Caribbean countries, and Sweden, Nordic countries, that was quite a shock. My humor didn't resonate with my wife's friends, my ex-wife now. The way that I enjoyed socializing was different, completely different. And so in the midst of the infrastructural challenges, I truly felt alone. In the Caribbean, we are often categorized by multi-generational homes. So it's very typical to see in a neighborhood parent, child, and grandchild, or multiple siblings and children. That community is really something that Caribbean people depend on to survive, which I think is fundamentally different to Swedish people, because the institutional support that is provided by the government in Sweden really takes away the need for interdependence in families. And I think I actually read somewhere in one of the Swedish government websites that the burden of taking care of your parents is not there. The burden of taking care of a child even, because Swedish governments provide financial support and food and academic support for children, and there's so much support that the government intervenes with, where in countries, developing countries like Trinidad, that support is found in your family. And so there is a closeness which I think might be felt as an invasiveness if it were happening in Sweden. So one can sit at home and unexpectedly be put in a position to entertain neighbors of family members. That is part of the Caribbean culture, it's part of the Caribbean identity, to be welcoming and open and ready to share what's in your fridge. At Christmas time, we have this culture that we call parang. Parang is a genre of music, which is Spanish-speaking, Hispanic, Latin vibe, Caribbean flavored infusion. But it's also a thing you do. You parang someone's house with music. So you go to someone's house at Christmas time, sometimes with a quattro. You play music and you socialize, and you assume they have alcohol and ham and pastel to share. So when you parang someone's house, you go there to get food. And that happens unexpectedly, so you have to always be ready to entertain. I think that's a key difference. The spontaneity of socialization and entertainment, that's a pretty key difference. And another one is, I guess, extended visits, what we call liming in Trinidad. In Sweden, you would call it a hanging out, but I've heard it described as the joy of doing nothing by an American. Liming for us is, we're hanging out, and we could lime in a group, we could lime together. I could lime by myself. It's just easy, unstructured being together. And that doesn't exist. We have fika in Sweden, but that's not unstructured. Fika is typically 30 minutes, and it typically has a start time, and it typically has a venue, and there's a lot more structure to how we do social interaction. So I can't spontaneously lime with you, and that lime is definitely not going to turn into something that extends into another time of day. We start the lime at lunch and it ends at 6 p.m. That doesn't typically happen. we have a set of expectations socially, so you know when it's appropriate to leave and you know when it's appropriate. I think in Trinidad we don't know when it's appropriate to leave. And so that's part of the culture, and it's part of what makes us loving. I'll give one more, and this is a sort of wider Caribbean example. In Jamaica, I went to a restaurant, a food place, and this lady is serving food. And I walk into the place. I smile and she smiles, and she looks at me and she's like, "Why are you so skinny?" Forgive the Jamaican accent. She immediately insulted me. And she immediately told me how skinny and nashy, and a Jamaican person called you nashy. She says, "Skinny and you're nashy. Why you don't eat?" And she's just telling me about how skinny I look. And at that same time, she said, let me put a little extra for you. She's giving me extra food. I'll give you some, you need some macaroni pie. I mean, you need some stewed chicken and take some goat. And she's just giving me all this food. Don't worry, you don't have to pay for it. Come, you have to eat. And that sort of double whammy of love and disrespect we call it Tobago love in Trinidad. That double whammy of love and disrespect, I don't think could exist here. I think it doesn't really exist here. So I'm often finding myself very measured when I speak in social situations here, because I'm aware that I could say something that may come across disrespectful, even though I mean it lovingly, or even though I mean it in a way that opens a door for me to help, which is what this lady was doing in Jamaica. She said something that opened the door for her to be generous. It's very easy to miss that was love that this woman was expressing to me, not criticism. And so those are some really deep differences. Oh, I said one more, but I want one more. On a bus. It's my favorite example. You walk into a bus in Trinidad, and I mean, of any other bus, there are old people, young people, school children, mothers, fathers, whatever. And in Trinidad, it's culturally appropriate to say good afternoon or good morning or good evening loudly enough for everyone in the bus to hear you and to respond. And at minimum, you get an eye contact and a head nod. If you don't do that, especially if you're like a child or a teenager in school uniform, which sort of represents that you are learning from the community, because this idea of it takes a village to raise a child is very prominent. So a child walking, "One boy, you don't have no manners." And I'm mixing my Trinidad and Jamaican accent. Forgive me, Caribbean people. That is so different in Sweden. In Sweden, no one will acknowledge you if you walk into the bus. And if you do acknowledge people, if you do say hello, you will likely be ignored or looked at as odd. And I didn't understand that at all at first. Eventually, what I learned through reading and research and TED Talks and different things like that about this bus experience is that not only is it not disrespectful in Sweden when someone does not acknowledge you on the bus, it's actually on the other side, it's quite respectful, because one perspective is that people are not going to interrupt you in your personal space by telling you hello when there is nothing to be said after that. So it's like giving reverence to everyone's personal space, which if you come from a Caribbean context, that point is difficult to land. As I said earlier, this idea of personal space is not super ingrained. And I think that's true in many cultures. I experienced that in China and I experienced that in Ethiopia. People are very connected to each other in a different way that they are in Sweden. I think the culture is quite unique. I think it would have to be a number of clicks for me to think about whether there was a moment where everything had clicked into place. I would have to piece together many things. There was certainly a moment where I knew that everything was broken. I absolutely was not functioning. at any capacity in Sweden. Your life is made up of so many parts. There's your relationship life and your work life and your financial life and your recreational life and all your different lives. A Buddhist lady, Auntie Allison, she told me that we are to imagine ourselves like a flower, a sunflower, with each petal being a piece of your life, each petal being one of your lives, your personal life, your relationship life, your financial life, and we are the big brown part. And today, I think that my sunflower is quite bloomed and facing the sun. There are some petals that are brighter than others, but I can compare that to a time that I definitely had my sunflower facing down and my petals withered. As I sit here today, I'm able to feel as if I am very close to the person I used to be in Trinidad. I'm more of my full self. I'm seen the way I see myself. I contribute confidently, and that is because I got a job. I have a home with my name on it, at least my name on the contract. And I have a lot of very simple things that were things that I had to fight so hard for. And I think that every immigrant living in Sweden, especially non-European immigrants, especially brown ones, we can appreciate the outsideness, the extreme outsideness, that's not a word I know, that we experience in Sweden. And now I am inside. I am inside in more ways than not. And so there is that click has happened, but it wasn't one click. It was Volvo and having a job. It was joining communities and being part of communities. It was people asking me to have coffee and help them, and having friends and knowing what events I like to go to and knowing what the cool places are in Sweden. None of those things didn't happen at once. They happened over time. It's having a permanent residency. It's having the ability to stay and live and work legally here. It's places like International House that have opened me up to seminars that give insights about the Swedish school system so that I can navigate my daughter's school, her academic career with confidence and with knowledge. It's so many things. Yeah, that's how I would take that. I needed to decidedly own my future. I needed to know that I was worthy of privileges that I didn't feel I had access to quite immediately. I needed to be open to the idea that I could have a great career, that I could have a great bank account, that I could have a great social life, that I could be respected and admired, even here. I needed to believe that I could have it all, despite the fact that audacity is laughable and has been laughable. So if I tell the average person, and I have, what some of my dreams are, they laugh. And I had to maintain the conviction of mind that I am worthy of having my dreams. There are a few things that I want to reference. There's this book called something, How Generalists Thrive in a Specialist Society, something like that. There was a phrase in that book that said, walk worthy, knowing that you can achieve what everyone else is. Don't walk with your head down thinking that you are not worthy of the room that you're in, or don't think that you're less than in any way. And that idea of walking worthy really helped me to navigate the insecurities that came with being unemployed, without a bank account, and unawed, illiterate in Swedish language. It's the confidence that is required just to be human, or the confidence that you lose when you move into a new culture, a new home, a new space, a new language. All of the confidence that you lose is immense. It's heavy. And so I had to have a mindset that I was worthy. Also, there's a poem by Tupac. It's called The Rose That Grew from Concrete. And I'll say it's very short. Have you heard about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's laws wrong, it learned how to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe the fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete, when no one else even cared. And what stands out to me about that poem is that line, funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams. Knowing that the dreams that I have had when I was 16, 17, 18 are still valid and they're still acquirable. And I hold on to my dreams. And I know that big dreams don't always manifest quickly. So you have to endure. And that takes me to another sort of mindset, that endurance and the flexibility. I think endurance is not about rigidity at all. It's about flexibility and having an open mindset or flexible mindset. Some call it an innovative mindset, where you are able to bounce back. I remember when I got my first job interview at Volvo, I had been working at a content agency that had Volvo as a main client, and I was a temporary employee, and I was working with strategies for Volvo trucks, Volvo Penta, Volvo Group, Volvo construction equipment. And I felt, okay, I'm now well acquainted with the Volvo marketing ecosystem, and I don't have a permanent job. So I'm going to just apply to Volvo like crazy because I can do a good job with Volvo. And I got a job interview at Volvo Penta. First interview, second interview, interview with the VP, interview with the SVP, interview with HR, psychometric test, logical test, final interview. And then the call. Kris, we loved you. We loved your interview. We think you're super smart and super cool, and we would love to have you on the team, but there were two of you at the very top, at the very end. And we had to choose one. And it was not you. I'm talking months of interviewing for what I really thought was a contract I had signed with the universe. This was happening. And I remember sitting on my couch, so deflated, like, what now? And the mindset that saved me was fail forward. You didn't come this far just to come this far. I know that's a Kim Kardashian joke, but you didn't come this far just to come this far. And the fact that you have made it this far proves that you are worthy. It's proof. So you're going to apply again, and you're going to keep applying. And the next application, I didn't have to do that many interviews because I had already gone through. I didn't have to do the psychometric and the logical because I had done it. I had actually failed forward. And 8 months later, 9 months later, I had an actual contract. And so the mindset of keeping myself worthy in the face of the blow to my confidence, the multiple blows to my confidence, and then having that pushed all the way to keep going even when you fail. Because it's very possible to be bogged down so much that you don't have the confidence to keep going, but you have to keep it. That kept me going. I have experienced rock bottom in Sweden. That is a privilege, to have experienced rock bottom, like really, where I was told that I was going to die. I mean, in the midst of having no job and having no money and all of these things and having no network and all of this, it really was the very rock bottom. And having had the privilege of seeing what life is like down there, I can say that the transformative thing for me was a belief that cells regenerate, that we as human beings are resilient by nature. We can get a cut and the cut heals itself. We can be laced with chemotherapy and all of our organs brutalized, and we will heal ourselves. Our hair would fall off and we would heal. It will grow back. Not exactly the way you had it before, but it grows back. And if we understand that about ourselves, not just biologically, but mentally, neurologically, spiritually, we know that once we have life, we have the ability to endure. And moving from a flower with its petals half eaten, looking down, to a flower that is looking up at the sun, came from knowing that once we decide to look up at the sun is going to be there and it's going to rejuvenate us. And I am now continuing to be super optimistic about the fact that I am worthy of every privilege that every other man or woman has on this planet. And I'm going to get it. Being ill in Sweden we have a joke in Sweden where your head could be half cut off and the doctor will prescribe paracetamol. So I ate paracetamol day in and day out for 2 years until it destroyed my liver. Really, we didn't know what was wrong, but we knew what to do. Take paracetamol until it was too late, until the cancer had evolved into stage 4 at the point of diagnosis. And then it moved from being annoyingly sick and coughing and tired and not knowing what's going on to dying, to being in the emergency room, to all sorts of things that I could never have dreamed. But my experience in the hospital here in Gothenburg, in as much as the memory of it is nauseating, if I see any of the nurses, I hug them and squeeze them. I'm lucky that one of the nurses has her son in the same preschool as my daughter, so I see her and I hug her every time. The love and care that I experienced from these strangers, it made me feel as if in the haze of all the medication, it felt like I had died and gone to heaven and there were angels. This Swedish healthcare system is so full of care and love. And in addition to the fact that my mother came right away to stay with me, they gave her a bed in the hospital. They understood that love had healing power, which I think is superb. I think that's something that Sweden can teach about, that deep understanding that human care is so vital. My mother slept in the hospital room with me on a different bed, and her love matched with the love of the nurses, I think is more powerful than chemo. So that's probably what I want to say. When I emerged from chemotherapy, I emerged divorced, a single parent, looking for a home, alone, but I had a job. And I went back out to work at Volvo, bald, skinny, tired, scared, but hopeful and connected to something. I had a job. The love that I experienced at Volvo, the care healed as well. It really healed me. The people at Försäkringskassan, insurance folks, they called and they said, "Kris, your job called and said you're back out to work. What are you doing? Why are you going back out to work? You don't have to. You can stay home and you'll be paid. You can stay home." And I said, "No, I absolutely have to. This is where I'm loved. This is where I'm supported. This is where I get energy. This is where I'm healing." And I healed at Volvo. Life now, with my metaphoric flower looking up, is hopeful, optimistic, and fragile, which means that I know that an unwatered flower will wither. And so I have started to discover ways to keep myself watered. So in addition to the mindset that I mentioned earlier, that I am worthy, that I will achieve whatever goal I want.
In the next episode, Kris shares how he built his network and learned to navigate both work culture and social life in Sweden.
When we meet people, we cannot just see them as individuals who have no meaning. So you have to not only treat people well and warmly, but you need to represent yourself consistently in a way that is repeatable. Give people the words to use to describe you. Being successful is hard. Being unsuccessful is hard. Choose your hard. And so in this social game that we all have to play, not everything is going to be easy.
If you like our podcast, please do subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast or YouTube so you can be notified when the next episode is released. And please give us a 5-star review, which helps other people find the podcast. This podcast is made by Move to Gothenburg, an initiative run by the West Sweden Chamber of Commerce and co-funded by the European Union, Region Västra Götaland, and several companies, universities and public organizations in the region. Thank you for listening.